It's time for the Jedi to end. Star Wars Episode 8 The Last Jedi is directed by Rian Johnson and starring Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, Oscar Isaac, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Adam Driver. Before I go any further, I just want to really specify there will not be any plot spoilers in this review. I cannot really go into a lot of my in-depth feelings about this film without delving into the plot, and I really don't want to do that. But I will do my best to paint things in as broad a brush as I possibly can. This is the newest film in the ever-expanding saga of Star Wars. We are once again reunited with some old characters that we know, and of course building upon the new ones that were introduced in The Force Awakens. And we are now picking up pretty much right where Episode 7 ended. The First Order and the Resistance are battling one another, Rey is meeting Luke Skywalker for the first time, and ultimately the film is about all of those things. I don't want to get into any more specifics than that. We have a new director at the helm. Taking over from J.J. Abrams is Rian Johnson, who is somewhat of a different director than Abrams is, and that is very much apparent in this film. This film feels very different than The Force Awakens. This film expands upon a lot of the things introduced in that film and changes a few things and goes in a few different directions. Granted, these are directions that not everyone is going to agree with. It is definitely much more of a risk-taking film than I remember most Star Wars films being. And a lot of the risks work and some of them may not work for others, but for me personally, a lot of them did. Personally, for me, I really like this film a lot. It is not a perfect film, but I think as a Star Wars film, it is at least interesting to me. It is a bold and, I dare say, ballsy film in a lot of respects. A lot of the details I can't go into right now for fear of spoiling, but right away I will say that Rian Johnson directs the heck out of this film, especially when it comes to the technical filmmaking aspects. The cinematography, the action sequences, the way they are shot, and just the way the film looks aesthetically, to me, is astounding. Some of the shots in this film are just awe-inspiring. Some of the greatest shots I think we've seen in any Star Wars film. The film is different than most Star Wars films because typically we are following maybe one or two plot lines. In this film, we are following more than that. And that can lead to a lot of disjointedness, which is very much a valid argument that I see many people having. When you have a lot of storylines going on, it is difficult to keep them all wrangled in and make them all succinct and flow well together. The film tries to do that by jumping from scene to scene and meshing all of the storylines together, but sometimes those transitions can be jarring. We can be transitioning from a scene that is very fascinating, very interesting, is really grabbing one's attention, at least my attention, and then we go on to something else that is probably not as interesting, and that happens quite a few times in the middle section of this film. The first act and third act of the film, I think, is where the film really thrives. They are definitely give us some of the best moments, but that middle part is not to be completely discontinued. That is where we get a lot of the heart of this film and get at a lot of the greatness that is in this film, and I do believe there's a lot of greatness in it. The middle section of this film, some may believe to be long and boring. To me, I found it to be fascinating because unlike a lot of the other Star Wars films that we have seen in the past that were very much plot-heavy driven, in the sense that the plot is what dictates the pacing of the film. Moving from plot point to plot point is a grand spatial adventure, it's a space opera, it's a spectacle. This film takes a very different approach to that. It is a character-based driven film, which is a lot different, especially when it comes to pacing, and that is why this film feels a lot slower than others. It also probably doesn't help that this film is 2.5 hours long, the longest of any Star Wars film up until this point, and you can definitely feel it at times, especially if you don't like certain plot elements within the middle of this film. There is one particular plot element that I think is the main negative aspect I have with this film. It feels like a different kind of movie. It feels kind of sticking out and not in line, especially tonally, with the rest of the film. And it's not that it's not good. I think it does a lot of positive things, especially when it's commenting on a lot of social and political themes, not only relevant to the Star Wars world, but really relevant to our world as well. It is a little bit on the nose at times, but I think it works in that respect. I kind of wish that perhaps they had shortened that sequence a little bit, done some things to make it a little more compelling, but it works for the characters and it gives those characters something to do. Speaking of characters, when it comes to the characters in this film that we've gotten to know, specifically from The Force Awakens, they do a very interesting thing in that all of the characters are now challenged in a different way. Our main three characters of Rey, Finn, and Poe are all on a different character journey from one another, and they're all really trying to figure certain things out, and perhaps they will succeed at certain things, and perhaps they won't. They're very humanistic, a lot more different than I've seen in past Star Wars films, where our heroes are rather idealized and they're rather perfect. These are rather imperfect, more human-type characters that we are seeing, and they are capable of failing at times, which I think is extremely fascinating. Which brings me to the old guard, which brings me to Luke Skywalker, whom people have been waiting a very long time to see back on screen, pretty much since Return of the Jedi back in 1983. And what we have here is a Luke Skywalker that is very interesting and fascinating to me when it comes from a character perspective. I would say that this is the best acting I have ever seen from Mark Hamill. He is mostly known for doing a lot of voiceover work, and his voiceover work is very much legendary. But when it comes to live-action cinema, he hasn't done much throughout his career, other than, of course, the iconic Luke Skywalker. But in this film, he delivers an astounding performance that I think really needs to be praised. And now we come to Carrie Fisher portraying General Leia or Princess Leia or just Leia, and this is her final role. Unfortunately, she did indeed pass away, and it was a wonderful swan song for her. It was a wonderful send-off where we see how pivotal a character she is in the world of Star Wars and how pivotal a person Carrie Fisher was in the lives of many people. It was very lovely to see the way they were able to send her off in a rather powerful and poetic way. I'm not sure if she will be in Episode 9 in any way. I'm not sure about the logistics behind any of that. And jumping back into the new characters, Kylo Ren is back, and he is portrayed by Adam Driver, and I think in a perfect way. He is the perfect combination of good and bad and conflict and complications, and there is a lot of depth within his character, a lot of things that we learn and are still questioning about a lot of his motivations, and it's really fascinating to see the relationship he has with Rey and where they all fit in the overall grand scheme of things when it comes to Star Wars. This film also has some of the most depth I've seen in a Star Wars film. It's not that Star Wars hasn't explored a lot of deep, meaningful themes in the past, because certainly it has. It's just that in this film, they are going even deeper and delving into things that a lot of the other previous films really didn't. I know a lot of people are seeing this film multiple times, and it helps on multiple views to really take in a lot of the thematic stuff, because this film is chock full of so many things. Like I said, it is a long film. It is a heavy film in many ways, and tonally it's different than a lot of the other films. It does have its light moments, but it's not traditionally how a Star Wars film has felt over the last couple of decades. Also, when it comes to negatives of this film, some of the acting could be seen as wooden by some of the actors. Some of the dialogue may not be the best in certain moments, but it didn't really wane on me in any way. I kind of overlooked a lot of those things. But without going into really any depth, I can't explain much else, so I'm going to wrap this up by saying that I really like this film a lot. I think it's a good film, really well made by Rian Johnson. It's definitely his vision on screen and him doing things I've never seen or never thought I would see in a Star Wars film, and I give him a lot of credit for that. Granted, a lot of his decisions may not be what others want or what I personally thought I was going to get with this film, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I'm going to give this film a 4.4 out of 5 stars. If you're a Star Wars fan, I think it's a must-see movie. You really have to know what people are talking about, whether they are viewing this film positively or negatively. But film is one of the most subjective mediums, so go out and make up your own mind when it comes to this. This has been my review of Star Wars The Last Jedi. If you like this video, please check out the other videos on my channel.